Imagine conquering most of the known world before the age of 33, only to die suddenly far from home. But what happened next is even more unbelievable. Some ancient sources claim that his body, one of the most valuable in history, was preserved in honey. Yes, honey. Today we uncover the strange truth behind the death of Alexander the Great, the mystery of his preserved body, and the incredible journey of his remains. In the year 323 BCE, the world stood in awe of a man who, by the age of 32, had conquered nearly every known civilization across 3 continents, a man whose name had become synonymous with military genius, unyielding ambition, and a vision of an empire stretching from the rugged mountains of Macedonia to the vast plains of Persia, the deserts of Egypt, and the distant river valleys of India. Alexander, the son of King Philip II of Macedon, had inherited not only a kingdom but also a vision of greatness that his father had begun and that he intended to complete in ways that the world had never seen before. From an early age, Alexander had been immersed in the teachings of some of the finest minds of his time, including the philosopher Aristotle, who had instilled in him a deep understanding of philosophy, science, politics, and literature, forming in him a mind that combined intellectual curiosity with an insatiable hunger for conquest. By the time he ascended to the Macedonian throne, he was already a seasoned soldier, having led troops in battle, strategized campaigns, and witnessed firsthand the brutality and glory of war, yet nothing in his young life could have prepared the world for the scale of what he would achieve. Over the next decade, Alexander's campaigns were marked by both brilliance and audacity, from the decisive Battle of Granicus to the legendary encounters at Issus and Gaugamela, where he defeated numerically superior Persian armies and ultimately toppled the mighty Achaemenid Empire, a feat that historians still regard as one of the most remarkable military achievements in human history. Each victory was not merely a testament to his tactical genius, but also to his ability to inspire loyalty and devotion among his troops, who followed him through deserts, mountains, and rivers, driven by a combination of fear, admiration, and a belief in the almost divine destiny of their leader. Alexander's conquests were not only military, they were cultural and political. He founded cities, many of which bore his name, and spread Greek culture across the regions he conquered, initiating what would later be known as the Hellenistic Age, a period in which Greek language, art, architecture, and ideas permeated the far reaches of his empire, blending with local traditions and creating a cultural fusion that shaped the Mediterranean, Near Eastern, and Asian worlds for centuries to come. Yet despite the grandeur of his achievements and the awe he inspired, Alexander's life, like all lives, was subject to the fragility of the human body, and it was in the city of Babylon, a place steeped in ancient history and grandeur, that the course of his extraordinary journey abruptly came to a halt. Babylon, the jewel of Mesopotamia, a city of magnificent walls, palaces, and temples, had been the ideal base for Alexander's continued campaigns. It was here that he planned new expeditions into Arabia and beyond, imagining territories even further east that he could bring under his banner, territories that few in his world had even conceived of, and yet, in the midst of these grand plans, Alexander's body began to betray him in a way that no amount of training, genius, or divine ambition could prevent. According to historical accounts, Alexander attended a series of feasts and celebrations in his honor, as was customary for kings, particularly one who had achieved so much at such a young age. The wine flowed freely, as it did in the courts of Babylon, and Alexander, known for both his stamina and his occasional indulgences, partook with his usual vigor. Yet it was after these festivities that he began to feel unwell. Initially the symptoms were mild, perhaps fatigue or a slight fever, but as the days passed, his condition deteriorated. The fever intensified, his body weakened, and he became increasingly unable to engage with his generals, who were accustomed to receiving instructions and guidance from the energetic and decisive monarch. What made this illness particularly alarming to those around him was not only the suddenness with which it struck, but also the resilience of a man whose body had survived countless battles, injuries, and hardships that would have felled ordinary soldiers. Alexander, who had ridden into battle under scorching sun, through mud and snow, and who had endured wounds from arrows, spears, and swords, now found himself at the mercy of an invisible enemy, a disease or poison, or perhaps a combination of both, the exact nature of which has been debated for centuries. As his condition worsened, the atmosphere in Babylon grew tense. His generals, who had long relied on his leadership and strategic mind, were thrown into uncertainty. The city itself, already a melting pot of cultures, politics, and intrigue, became a stage for anxiety and speculation. Courtiers whispered theories of poisoning, rivalries, and divine punishment, while physicians struggled with the limited medical knowledge of the time, attempting remedies that ranged from herbal concoctions to rituals invoking the favor of the gods. Alexander, ever the observer and strategist even in weakness, reportedly listened to advice and responded to visitors, but his physical strength waned daily. He could no longer walk without assistance, could barely speak, and eventually became entirely incapacitated. Historians recount that he retained awareness until the very end, recognizing friends and allies, issuing final instructions, and demonstrating the clarity of mind that had guided him across continents. Yet his body, the vessel that had carried him from the hills of Macedonia to the deserts of Persia and the banks of the Indus River, had reached its limit. After approximately 10 days of illness, Alexander the Great, the man who had envisioned himself as not merely a king but a world conqueror, passed away, leaving behind an empire without a clear successor and a world forever changed by his conquests. The shock of his death was profound. Soldiers, generals, and citizens alike were stunned that a man who had seemed larger than life, whose ambitions had reached the very edges of the known world, could succumb so swiftly and quietly. Mourning was mixed with fear, for the empire was vast and fragile, and without Alexander's guiding hand, uncertainty and chaos threatened to engulf his territories. The lack of a definitive explanation for his death fueled myths and legends that would persist for millennia. Ancient historians offered multiple hypotheses, ranging from natural causes such as fever, malaria, or typhoid, to deliberate poisoning orchestrated by rivals, or even internal conspiracies within his court. Some accounts suggest a combination of overexertion, alcohol, and the physical toll of years of relentless campaigning, all converging to claim the life of a man who seemed invincible to everyone but himself. Beyond the political implications, Alexander's death raised philosophical and cultural questions about mortality, destiny, and the nature of greatness. How could a man who had seemed almost superhuman, whose feats were recounted with reverence across continents, be reduced to the frailty of ordinary human life? How could the conqueror of worlds succumb to forces that no army, strategy, or weapon could counter? In this way, the death of Alexander the Great was not merely an event of historical record, it became a symbol of the limits of human ambition, the inevitability of mortality, and the mysteries that surround the lives of those who shape history in extraordinary ways. In the days following his death, Babylon itself was gripped by a mixture of grief, awe, and apprehension. Generals convened to discuss succession, soldiers prepared for the journey of his body, and citizens contemplated the loss of a figure whose life had defined an era. The stories of his campaigns, his bold strategies, his unyielding courage, and his vision for an interconnected world of cultures would continue to circulate, inspiring both admiration and emulation for generations to come, yet always tinged with the melancholy of what was lost in his sudden departure. Alexander's death, sudden and enigmatic, marked the end of a life that had reshaped the ancient world, but it also set in motion a series of events that would ensure his legend endured far beyond his years, for even in death, the name of Alexander the Great would continue to command attention, inspire awe, and spark the imagination of historians, storytellers, and those who marveled at the extraordinary potential of human ambition. His body, his empire, and his dreams became intertwined with myth, with every subsequent generation attempting to reconcile the man's mortal fragility with his almost godlike achievements, creating a narrative in which the sudden fall of a hero becomes as legendary as his rise, and in which the story of Alexander's death is inseparable from the story of Alexander's life, forever preserving him in the collective memory of the world he once conquered. After the sudden and shocking death of Alexander the Great in Babylon, a city already steeped in centuries of history, the events that followed were as remarkable and mysterious as his life itself. The world had witnessed the passing of a man whose conquests had stretched across continents, whose strategies had rewritten the rules of warfare, and whose vision for a culturally connected empire had begun to reshape the very fabric of civilization. Yet in death, Alexander's story did not end in the way most expected. According to the ancient sources, what immediately captured the attention of those around him was not only the grief that his death provoked, but the extraordinary condition of his body, which appeared, to those who saw it, to resist the natural process of decay that would inevitably claim all mortals. In the days following his passing, witnesses reported that Alexander's body remained astonishingly preserved. It retained its color, its form, and an almost lifelike appearance that defied the expectations of ancient physicians and attendants. For a culture that observed death closely, that held funerary practices and ritual observances in high regard, and that was keenly aware of the fleeting nature of life, this phenomenon was both awe-inspiring and deeply unsettling. Those present could not ignore the apparent contradiction. A man who had succumbed to illness, whose body should have already begun to show the effects of fever and decline, seemed instead to maintain the appearance of vitality, as if suspended in time between life and death. This unusual preservation sparked a wave of speculation, discussion, and even veneration. Some saw it as a confirmation of Alexander's semi-divine status, a sign that the gods themselves had intervened to protect him even in death. In many cultures, extraordinary preservation of a body was considered evidence of favor by higher powers, and in a society steeped in Greek mythology and the reverence of heroes, Alexander's apparent resistance to decay could not have been interpreted as mere coincidence. Scholars and historians of the era recounted that the body's limbs remained supple, the skin unblemished, and the features retained the dignity and majesty befitting the conqueror who had never known defeat in life. It was as if his physical form mirrored the timelessness of his achievements, frozen in the image of a man whose ambition and intellect had left an indelible mark on the world. The question naturally arose: how was this possible? What method had been employed to maintain such a remarkable state of preservation? Ancient sources, which were often a mixture of observation, hearsay, and legend, suggested something astonishing. They claimed that Alexander's body may have been immersed in honey, a substance that had been valued for millennia for its unique properties. Honey, in the ancient world, was much more than a sweetener. It was prized for its antibacterial qualities, its ability to prevent spoilage, and its symbolic association with purity, immortality, and divine favor. In the harsh and unpredictable climate of the ancient Near East, where food and medicine alike faced rapid decay due to heat, moisture, and microorganisms, honey was understood to be one of the most effective natural preservatives available. Its use in preserving fruits, meats, and other organic materials was well documented, and it is conceivable that those responsible for Alexander's body would have turned to this substance as a means of ensuring that the conqueror's remains remained intact during the turbulent days that followed his death. The practical reasoning was clear. Alexander had died far from his Macedonian homeland, and the journey to bring his body to a final resting place, whether in Memphis or Alexandria, would have been long, arduous, and fraught with political and logistical challenges. The preservation of his body was not merely a matter of reverence, it was a necessity. If decay were to set in before the body could be transported, it would have been both a practical disaster and a symbolic embarrassment, undermining the dignity of a ruler who had commanded armies and empires. Honey, with its high sugar concentration, low water content, and natural antimicrobial properties, provided an elegant solution. By immersing the body in honey or coating it thoroughly, Alexander's attendants could slow the decomposition process, effectively buying time for the complex arrangements that would follow his death. The process may have involved placing the body in a large container filled with honey, possibly combined with other substances such as oils, resins, or spices, which were commonly used in embalming practices throughout the ancient world. These substances not only enhanced preservation but also served ceremonial purposes, reflecting the status of the deceased and signaling to observers that the individual held exceptional importance. Beyond the practical considerations, there was also a symbolic dimension to the use of honey in preserving Alexander's body. In many cultures, honey was associated with the divine, with the eternal, and with the transcendent. It was used in religious rituals, in offerings to the gods, and in funerary practices that sought to honor the dead and ensure their journey into the afterlife. By encasing Alexander in honey, his attendants may have been signaling that he was not merely a mortal king but a figure whose significance transcended ordinary human existence. This act of preservation thus functioned on multiple levels. It protected the body physically, maintained the dignity and majesty of the deceased, and communicated to the world the enduring importance of a man who had, in life, seemed destined to shape the course of history itself. The reports of Alexander's preserved body also played a critical role in shaping the political dynamics that emerged after his death. In the absence of a clear successor for Alexander had left no adult heir ready to assume control of his vast empire, The generals and satraps who had served under him immediately recognized the symbolic and strategic value of his remains. Possession of Alexander's body was more than a matter of honor, it was a statement of legitimacy. Whoever controlled the body could claim a connection to his authority and, by extension, a measure of control over the territories he had conquered. In this context, the preserved state of the body was even more significant. A body that remained intact, lifelike, and impressive could serve as a potent political tool, reinforcing claims of power and divine favor in a period marked by uncertainty and rivalry. Historical accounts suggest that several of Alexander's generals, most notably Ptolemy, perceived the strategic importance of securing the body. The physical preservation of Alexander thus became intertwined with the political preservation of his legacy, illustrating the extent to which his death continued to shape events even after his passing. The fascination with Alexander's preserved body also extended beyond the immediate political context, capturing the imagination of contemporaries and later historians alike. Writers such as Plutarch, Arrian, and Curtius Rufus devoted considerable attention to the circumstances surrounding his death and the subsequent treatment of his remains, recounting the extraordinary preservation as a matter of historical record, legend, and moral reflection. These accounts emphasize the impact that such an unusual phenomenon would have had on those who witnessed it firsthand. Soldiers who had marched alongside him across deserts and rivers, courtiers who had participated in feasts and councils, and physicians who had attempted in vain to save him from illness. To all of them, the preserved body of Alexander was a tangible reminder of the man's exceptional life and the almost supernatural aura that seemed to accompany him. From a modern perspective, the reports of Alexander's body resisting decay invite both scientific and historical speculation. While the exact methods used are unknown, the principles behind honey preservation are well understood today. Honey's low moisture content creates an environment inhospitable to bacteria and fungi, while its acidity further inhibits microbial growth. When combined with oils, resins, or other embalming substances, honey can serve as a remarkably effective preservative, capable of maintaining a body's appearance for weeks or even months. It is therefore plausible that the ancient accounts, though often mixed with legend, reflect an early form of embalming practice, one that drew upon the natural properties of honey to achieve a result that was both practical and symbolic. In addition to its physical effects, the preserved state of Alexander's body reinforced cultural narratives about the relationship between mortality, heroism, and divinity. In Greek thought, the line between mortals and heroes was often blurred, with exceptional individuals sometimes elevated to divine status after death. By resisting decay, Alexander's body may have been interpreted as evidence of this elevation, suggesting that the conqueror had transcended ordinary human limitations and was now enshrined in a form of posthumous immortality. This perception in turn would have contributed to the enduring legend of Alexander the Great, ensuring that his name, deeds, and persona continued to inspire reverence and study long after his death. The phenomenon of Alexander's preserved body also had implications for funerary practices more broadly. It highlighted the interplay between practical preservation techniques and symbolic considerations, demonstrating that in the ancient world, the treatment of the dead was not merely a matter of hygiene or logistics, but a reflection of social status, political ambition, and spiritual belief. By choosing substances such as honey, oils, and resins, attendants could simultaneously protect the body from decay, honor the deceased, and communicate complex messages to observers about power, legitimacy, and divine favor. Moreover, the reports of Alexander's body resisting decay served as a point of connection between cultures. Honey, as a substance prized across the Mediterranean, Near East, and beyond, was widely understood to possess preservative qualities. Its use in the context of Alexander's death reflects a shared knowledge of natural resources and an early form of experimentation with materials that would influence embalming and preservation practices for centuries. In this way, the story of Alexander's preserved body illustrates both the ingenuity of his attendants and the broader cultural and scientific context in which they operated. As the days and weeks passed, Alexander's preserved body continued to attract attention. Soldiers, officials, and visitors from distant regions came to witness the phenomenon, marveling at the apparent defiance of nature and the dignity of the deceased king. Each observation, each account, added to the layers of legend that surrounded his final days, creating a narrative that blended history, science, and myth in a way that few other figures in antiquity could match. The enduring fascination with Alexander's body, whether preserved in honey or treated with other substances, continues to fascinate and intrigue us. Also underscores the human desire to extend life, to maintain the presence of those we revere, and to confront the inevitability of death through ingenuity and ritual. In Alexander's case, the combination of practical preservation and symbolic significance ensured that even in death, he remained a central figure in the political, cultural, and historical imagination of his world. In sum, the remarkable preservation of Alexander the Great's body represents a convergence of practical necessity, cultural symbolism, and historical narrative. Whether through the natural properties of honey, the careful application of embalming techniques, or the embellishments of later historians, the accounts suggest that his body did not immediately succumb to decay, leaving an impression of vitality and dignity that reflected the extraordinary life he had led. This phenomenon not only facilitated the transport and ceremonial treatment of his remains, but also reinforced his legacy as a figure of almost divine status, a conqueror whose influence continued to shape events, inspire admiration, and captivate imaginations long after his passing, demonstrating that in both life and death, Alexander the Great remained truly exceptional. The question of why Alexander the Great's body may have been preserved in honey is one that has intrigued historians, scientists, and storytellers for centuries, blending the realms of practical necessity, cultural symbolism, and legend into a narrative that seems almost too extraordinary to be true. Honey, a substance that has been prized by human civilizations for thousands of years, was not merely a sweetener or a culinary delight. It was recognized across ancient societies as a powerful preservative, a medicinal agent, and a symbol of divinity and immortality, making it an ideal medium for safeguarding the remains of a man whose life had touched the entire known world. In the ancient Near East, where Alexander's final days unfolded, honey was understood to possess remarkable properties that could prevent decay and inhibit the growth of bacteria, even in climates that were otherwise hostile to preservation. The natural composition of honey, with its high sugar content, low moisture levels, and acidic pH, creates an environment that is extremely difficult for microorganisms to survive in, making it a substance that could, in principle, slow the decomposition of organic matter for weeks or even months. This scientific reality would have been observed empirically by ancient peoples long before it could be understood in modern biochemical terms. The ability of honey to keep fruits, meats, and other perishable items edible over extended periods would have been apparent through generations of trial and observation. To those responsible for Alexander's body, who faced the immense challenge of transporting it from Babylon to its intended burial site, the practical benefits of using honey were clear. The journey to Egypt or Macedonia was not a simple one. It involved traversing great distances under harsh conditions, with limited technology for refrigeration or other forms of preservation. Exposure to heat, humidity, and bacteria could have rapidly reduced the condition of the body, potentially rendering it unrecognizable or unsuitable for the ceremonial purposes that would follow. In this context, the use of honey was a solution both ingenious and effective, leveraging natural properties to overcome logistical constraints. But the story of honey in this context is not merely one of practicality, it is deeply intertwined with cultural and symbolic meaning. In many ancient societies, honey was associated with purity, longevity, and the divine. Its golden color, sweetness, and ability to resist decay made it an ideal metaphor for eternal life and transcendence, qualities that were highly desirable in the treatment of a figure as extraordinary as Alexander. The act of preserving his body in honey would have signaled not only a concern for physical integrity, but also an acknowledgement of his unique status, a recognition that this was a man whose significance extended beyond the ordinary limits of mortality. Honey was also central to religious and ritual practices in the ancient world. It was often used in offerings to gods, in the consecration of sacred spaces, and in funerary rites designed to honor the dead and ensure their safe passage to the afterlife. By enveloping Alexander's body in honey, his attendants may have been drawing on these symbolic associations, creating a bridge between practical preservation and ritual observance, demonstrating both reverence for the deceased and an understanding of the spiritual dimensions of death. The symbolic resonance of honey is further amplified when one considers Alexander's own self-image and the way he was perceived by others. Throughout his life, Alexander cultivated a persona that combined human ambition with divine association. He identified himself with heroes of Greek mythology, claimed descent from gods, and was often treated as semi-divine by his followers. The preservation of his body in honey would have been a fitting extension of this narrative, a tangible manifestation of the notion that he transcended ordinary human mortality. Honey, as a medium that resists decay and maintains integrity, serves as a perfect metaphor for the enduring legacy of a man who reshaped empires and cultures. The practical aspects of using honey in preservation may have included immersing the body entirely in a container of honey, ensuring that it was completely surrounded by the substance, thereby limiting exposure to air and bacteria. Additional substances, such as oils, resins, and aromatic spices, may have been incorporated to enhance both the preservation and ceremonial aspects of the process. Oils could coat the skin, providing a barrier against moisture and further slowing decomposition, while resins and aromatic substances would have helped to mask odors, add antimicrobial effects, and impart a sense of sacredness to the body. This combination of substances reflects an early understanding of embalming techniques, demonstrating that ancient societies were capable of sophisticated methods to prolong the integrity of a body, even under challenging conditions. Beyond the physical and chemical considerations, the use of honey also had profound political implications. Following Alexander's death, the struggle for control over his empire intensified among his generals, who were collectively known as the Diadochi. Possession of Alexander's body became a symbolic assertion of authority, a way for a general to legitimize his claim to leadership or influence over territories that had once been unified under the king's command. In this context, the preservation of the body in honey ensured that it remained an impressive and intact symbol, capable of conveying power and continuity, and serving as a rallying point for supporters or a deterrent to rivals. Historical sources suggest that Ptolemy, one of Alexander's most trusted generals, recognized the strategic importance of the preserved body. By securing it and transporting it to Egypt, Ptolemy not only safeguarded the king's remains but also strengthened his own position as a legitimate ruler in the eyes of soldiers, subjects, and other political actors. The state of the body maintained through honey preservation thus became an instrument of influence, demonstrating how practical, symbolic, and political considerations were all deeply intertwined in this extraordinary episode. The fascination with honey preservation also reflects broader cultural attitudes toward death, mortality, and legacy in the ancient world. In societies where the afterlife, ancestral veneration, and the remembrance of great individuals were central concerns, extraordinary measures to preserve a body were both a practical and moral imperative. Alexander's life, defined by ambition, conquest, and vision, demanded a treatment of his death that matched his accomplishments. Honey, with its unique properties, provided a medium through which his physical form could be maintained, allowing him to remain a figure of reverence and a tangible connection to the ideals and memories that he embodied. Moreover, the narrative of honey preservation has endured precisely because it resonates with human fascination with immortality and the miraculous. The idea that a man's body could resist decay, that he could, in some sense, remain unspoiled by time, aligns with broader myths and legends about heroes, demigods, and individuals who transcend ordinary existence. It captures the imagination in a way that straightforward historical accounts cannot, blending science, ritual, and storytelling into a cohesive and compelling narrative that has lasted for millennia. From a scientific perspective, the plausibility of honey as a preservative is reinforced by modern understanding of its antimicrobial properties. Honey's high osmolarity draws water away from microorganisms, its acidity creates a hostile environment for bacterial growth, and its natural enzymes further inhibit decay. While modern embalming practices are far more sophisticated, these basic principles would have been observable and exploitable by ancient practitioners, providing a rational explanation for the remarkable reports of Alexander's preserved body. In addition to its chemical properties, honey's symbolic associations cannot be understated. Across multiple cultures in the ancient Mediterranean and Near East, honey was connected with life, fertility, and divine favor. Its golden color evoked the sun and its energy, and its sweetness was linked metaphorically to the pleasures and rewards of existence. In this sense, the preservation of Alexander's body in honey served not only a practical purpose but also communicated to observers that the king remained under the protection of divine forces, that his spirit and legacy were undiminished, and that his extraordinary life continued to resonate beyond the limits of mortality. Furthermore, the use of honey highlights the ingenuity and adaptability of Alexander's attendants and physicians. Faced with a unique challenge, the transportation and safeguarding of the remains of a king whose loss had triggered both grief and political turmoil, they turned to a substance that was readily available, effective, and culturally meaningful: Their choice reflects a sophisticated understanding of materials, preservation techniques, and the symbolic power of ritual, demonstrating that even in moments of crisis, human creativity and knowledge could be applied to address complex problems. In considering why honey was used, one must also reflect on the broader historical context. Alexander's empire was vast and diverse, encompassing regions with different climates, resources, and cultural practices. The practical need to preserve a body for transport across deserts, rivers, and mountains would have been paramount. Honey, with its longevity, stability, and widespread availability, was a natural choice. Capable of maintaining the body's integrity across long distances and ensuring that it arrived at its destination in a state befitting the king. The implications of honey preservation extend even further, influencing subsequent funerary practices and the cultural imagination. Reports of Alexander's body preserved in honey circulated among historians, writers, and storytellers, contributing to the legend of a man whose life and death were intertwined with the miraculous. These accounts reinforced notions of divine favor, heroic status, and extraordinary legacy, establishing a narrative in which the boundaries between history and myth, science and legend, practical action and symbolic meaning, were fluid and mutually reinforcing. In essence, the preservation of Alexander's body in honey represents a convergence of multiple threads: the practical concerns of transporting a body across great distances, the symbolic associations of honey with immortality and divinity, the political significance of controlling the remains of a ruler, and the cultural fascination with heroes who transcend ordinary mortality. It is a story that illustrates the ingenuity, reverence, and imagination of those who surrounded Alexander in his final days, and it highlights the enduring human desire to maintain connections with those we revere, to extend life beyond its natural limits, and to confront the inevitability of death through both material and symbolic means. Over time, the narrative of Alexander's preserved body became a point of fascination not only for contemporaries but for generations of historians, writers, and audiences who marveled at the idea of a conqueror's body resisting decay. It inspired questions about science, ritual, divine favor, and the relationship between human ambition and mortality. Whether every detail of these accounts is historically accurate or partly embellished, the core idea that honey was used to preserve the remains of one of history's greatest figures has persisted, captivating imaginations for more than 2,000 years and becoming an integral part of the legend of Alexander the Great. Thus, the use of honey to preserve Alexander's body stands at the intersection of science, culture, politics, and myth. It was practical, effective, and meaningful, ensuring that the body of a man who had conquered continents, reshaped empires, and inspired awe in life could continue to command respect and influence even after death. It reflects the ancient understanding of natural materials, the symbolic power of substances, and the desire to protect, honor, and immortalize those whose lives have left an indelible mark on the world. In contemplating why honey was chosen, one sees not only the brilliance of practical preservation but also the profound resonance of a substance capable of sustaining both body and legend, bridging the gap between mortality and eternity, and ensuring that Alexander the Great, in life and in death, remained a figure worthy of reverence, wonder, and enduring fascination. The story of honey preservation, therefore, is not merely a curious historical anecdote. It is a testament to human ingenuity, cultural symbolism, and the extraordinary lengths to which those who serve great figures will go to maintain their dignity, power, and memory. It is a story that continues to captivate, reminding us that even in the most practical solutions, such as the use of a simple, natural substance, there exists a profound connection to identity, legacy, and the eternal human desire to transcend the limits of time. Following the death of Alexander the Great in Babylon, the city that had witnessed the final moments of one of history's most extraordinary figures became the stage for a drama of power, loyalty, and intrigue that would shape the fate of the vast empire he had built, and the struggle that unfolded was not only over territories or armies, but in a remarkable turn of events, over the body of the man himself, whose remains had become the ultimate symbol of authority, legitimacy, and continuity in a world suddenly bereft of its dominant force. Alexander's death created a political vacuum of unprecedented scale. The empire he left behind stretched from the mountains of Macedonia in the west to the deserts of Persia in the east, encompassing a dizzying array of cultures, peoples, and cities, each with their own local rulers, traditions, and ambitions, and yet all held together under the unifying authority of a man whose charisma, military genius, and vision had commanded obedience and loyalty far beyond the natural bounds of any kingdom. In the absence of a clear successor, the generals and satraps who had served him, collectively known as the diadochi, faced a dilemma of immense complexity. Who would govern, who would inherit power, and, perhaps most importantly, who would gain control over Alexander's body, which had become a tangible emblem of ultimate authority, an object whose possession could legitimize political claims, reinforce loyalty among troops, and send a powerful message to both allies and rivals about the continuity of leadership. The struggle for Alexander's body was not a simple matter of funerary practice. It was a battle of politics and perception, a contest in which the physical integrity of a corpse had direct ramifications for the control of empires. Ancient societies placed immense symbolic and ritual importance on the treatment of the dead, particularly rulers and figures of extraordinary significance, and in Alexander's case, this was amplified by his own self-fashioning as a semi-divine figure. His connections to heroic lineages, and the extraordinary reverence he commanded among both Macedonian and conquered peoples. Reports suggest that multiple factions within Babylon recognized the value of controlling the body, and debates arose immediately regarding the proper handling, preservation, and eventual interment of the king. Some advocated for rapid burial in Babylon itself, both for practical reasons and to maintain immediate control over the deceased's remains. Others argued for transport to Macedonia, the homeland of the king, where the body could be honored according to the customs of the Macedonian court, and where possession would reinforce claims of dynastic continuity. Amid this uncertainty, the body of Alexander became an object of intense focus, its preservation, appearance, and condition closely monitored by attendants, physicians, and generals alike. It is in this context that the extraordinary measures reportedly taken to preserve the body, including immersion in honey, took on an added layer of significance. Beyond the practical considerations of preventing decay, the preserved body became a political instrument, a symbol whose very state could confer legitimacy upon whoever controlled it. One of Alexander's most astute generals, Ptolemy, quickly recognized the strategic importance of the king's remains. Ptolemy had been a trusted commander during Alexander's campaigns, and he understood the broader political landscape. The empire was vast, rival generals were ambitious, and the control of symbolic assets such as Alexander's body could tip the balance of power in a region where loyalty was fluid, and claims to authority were constantly contested. Ptolemy's decision to intervene in the handling of the body reflects a keen understanding of both human psychology and political symbolism. By taking possession of the preserved corpse, he could assert his own legitimacy as a central figure in the new order, reinforce the loyalty of troops and officials, and stake a claim that was as much ceremonial and symbolic as it was practical. According to historical sources, Ptolemy's intervention was deliberate and carefully executed. The funeral procession, which had been organized to transport Alexander's body according to the plans of those in Babylon, was intercepted by Ptolemy's forces, who redirected the journey toward Egypt, where he intended to consolidate power and establish a dynastic legacy. This act of seizing the body was not a mere theft, it was a calculated political maneuver, an assertion that in controlling Alexander's remains, Ptolemy controlled not just the corpse but the narrative of succession and legitimacy, and by extension, the loyalty of the armies and subjects who had once obeyed the great king himself. The journey of Alexander's body, then, became a matter of immense importance and extraordinary care. Preserved in honey or other embalming substances, it was transported with great diligence, often in elaborate containers and guarded by trusted soldiers, reflecting the combination of reverence, practicality, and political calculation that characterized this episode. Along the way, the preserved body served as a tangible reminder of authority, inspiring loyalty among troops, deterring potential rivals, and maintaining a connection to the memory of Alexander himself in a manner that words, proclamations, or symbols alone could not achieve. A struggle over the body also highlights the broader challenges faced by Alexander's generals in the immediate aftermath of his death. The empire he had created was unprecedented in scale, incorporating diverse regions with their own local elites, cultural traditions, and political structures, all of which required careful management to prevent fragmentation. The generals, while loyal to Alexander, were also ambitious, seeking to carve out territories and power bases for themselves in the absence of a clear successor. In this context, control over the king's body provided both a moral and practical advantage. It legitimized claims to leadership, reinforced alliances, and created a narrative of continuity that could stabilize otherwise volatile regions. Historical accounts suggest that other factions and generals were aware of Ptolemy's intentions and sought to assert their own claims over the body. Negotiations, threats, and displays of military might accompany the process, as each party recognized that the corpse of the king was not merely a physical object but a potent symbol of political authority, capable of shaping the loyalties and perceptions of entire populations. This intense focus on a single body underscores the unique intersection of mortality, symbolism, and power in the ancient world. The death of a ruler could destabilize empires, and the treatment of the deceased could influence outcomes in ways that extended far beyond the battlefield. The use of honey or other preservatives further amplified the political significance of the corpse. By maintaining the body in a state that appeared lifelike and impressive, Ptolemy ensured that it could continue to function as a symbol of authority, even as the empire fragmented and generals contested territories. The visual impact of a preserved king reinforced the perception of continuity, suggested divine favor, and provided a tangible link to the charismatic leadership that had once united vast regions under a single banner. This episode also reveals much about the values and priorities of ancient societies. Reverence for rulers, concern with appearances, and the symbolic power of the body were intertwined with practical governance, strategic calculation, and military control. Possessing Alexander's body was more than an act of devotion, it was a strategic maneuver designed to shape perceptions, command loyalty, and consolidate power in an environment of uncertainty and ambition. The struggle over Alexander's remains is further illustrative of the ways in which death and politics intersected in the ancient world. Unlike modern contexts, where symbolic and practical authority may be separate, in antiquity, the treatment of a deceased ruler could directly impact governance, succession, and control over populations. The preserved body became a site of negotiation, competition, and display, with its condition, location, and ceremonial treatment influencing perceptions of legitimacy and reinforcing hierarchical structures that were crucial for maintaining order across a vast and culturally heterogeneous empire. Moreover, the narrative of the battle for Alexander's body demonstrates the foresight and political acumen of Ptolemy, who would go on to establish the Ptolemaic dynasty in Egypt, ruling as pharaoh and creating a stable, prosperous kingdom that integrated Greek and Egyptian traditions. By controlling the king's remains, Ptolemy not only secured immediate political advantage, but also anchored his authority in symbolic power of a figure whose life and deeds commanded respect and admiration across generations. The procession of Alexander's body toward Egypt, therefore, was more than a journey of physical transport. It was a calculated exercise in political theater, ceremonial display, and strategic positioning. Each decision about where to place the body, how to preserve it, and who would accompany it reflected a sophisticated understanding of the interplay between symbolism and power, demonstrating that in the ancient world, authority could be embodied in ways that extended beyond the living presence of the ruler. Historical sources describe elaborate measures taken to protect and honor the body along the journey. It was reportedly transported in containers designed to maintain its condition, guarded by trusted soldiers and accompanied by ceremonies that reinforced both reverence and legitimacy. These measures highlight the extraordinary care and attention devoted to ensuring that the body remained a powerful instrument of political influence, capable of shaping the loyalties of troops, subjects, and rival leaders alike. The struggle for Alexander's body also illustrates the enduring significance of personal and symbolic connections in leadership. While territories could be divided, armies could be commanded, and political authority could be negotiated, the presence of the king's body provided a unique form of legitimacy that no other asset could replicate. It was a reminder of the man who had conquered empires, a physical manifestation of his charisma and authority, and a tool through which political power could be asserted, reinforced, and contested. As the body was finally brought to Egypt, it became central to the foundation of a new political order. Ptolemy's careful handling of the corpse allowed him to consolidate power, establish dynastic legitimacy, and create a narrative of continuity that would endure for centuries. The preserved body of Alexander served as both a tangible connection to the past and a symbol of authority that reinforced Ptolemy's rule, demonstrating the profound interplay between mortality, symbolism, and political strategy. In essence, the battle for Alexander's body was not merely a struggle over remains, it was a struggle over the very idea of succession, legitimacy, and the continuity of power. The preserved corpse functioned as a political instrument, a sacred relic, and a symbol of divine favor, ensuring that even in death, Alexander remained central to the unfolding drama of empires, generals, and civilizations. This episode reveals much about human ingenuity, ambition, and the ways in which physical objects, especially the body of a revered figure, can shape history, influence political calculations, and serve as a focal point around which power, loyalty, and authority coalesce, reminding us that in the ancient world, the boundaries between life, death, and political legitimacy were profoundly intertwined, and that the legacy of a conqueror could extend far beyond the limits of mortality, carried forward by both the preservation of the body and the enduring impact of deeds, vision, and legend. After Alexander the Great's body was seized by Ptolemy and transported from Babylon, the question of where the conqueror would ultimately rest became one of the most significant concerns for his successors, historians, and admirers alike. Reflecting a complex interplay of political strategy, cultural tradition, religious symbolism, and human reverence for extraordinary individuals. The journey of Alexander's body was not simply a matter of geography, it was a calculated and deliberate process that aimed to ensure both the physical integrity of his remains and the enduring authority of the man whose conquests had reshaped the known world. Egypt, with its long-standing traditions of elaborate funerary practices, monumental tombs, and a rich understanding of preservation techniques, was ultimately chosen as the destination, a location that would allow Ptolemy to establish both political dominance and symbolic continuity. The city of Memphis initially received Alexander's body, where it was reportedly treated with immense care, preserved in honey or other substances to prevent decay, and displayed in a manner befitting a ruler of unmatched stature, creating both awe and reverence among the local population and visiting dignitaries. The presence of the body in Memphis reinforced Ptolemy's claim to power, demonstrating his loyalty to the memory of the great king and his capacity to safeguard the legacy that others might have contested. The Egyptians, whose culture was steeped in rituals surrounding death and the afterlife, would have been deeply attuned to the symbolic and practical significance of Alexander's remains. In a land where tombs, embalming, and monumental commemoration were central to concepts of divine favor, legacy, and authority, the treatment of the Macedonian conqueror's body had implications far beyond mere physical preservation. It signaled respect for his achievements, an alignment of Macedonian and Egyptian cultural practices, and the assertion that Alexander's presence, even in death, conferred legitimacy upon those who cared for him. Historical accounts suggest that Ptolemy initially considered several possible locations for the final resting place, weighing both political and practical factors. Alexandria, a city he would later establish and name after the king, emerged as the preferred site, offering strategic advantage, cultural prominence, and the potential to create a central locus of power that could endure for centuries. By placing Alexander's body in Alexandria, Ptolemy not only honored the king but also anchored his own rule, intertwining his authority with the memory and legacy of the conqueror in a manner that no other location could achieve. The construction of a suitable tomb or mausoleum was itself an elaborate undertaking, combining architectural skill, ritual observance, and symbolic intent. While the exact details of Alexander's tomb are shrouded in mystery and debated by historians, sources describe a magnificent structure designed to convey both grandeur and permanence, intended to reflect the extraordinary life of the man it contained. Such a tomb would have served multiple functions: as a site of public veneration, a symbol of dynastic legitimacy, a political tool, and a cultural monument that reinforced the continuity of leadership in a turbulent post-Alexandrian world. The presence of Alexander's preserved body in its final resting place created a nexus of influence, ritual, and imagination. Pilgrims, dignitaries, and generals visited the tomb to pay homage, reinforcing both social and political hierarchies while solidifying the memory of Alexander as a figure who transcended ordinary mortality. The preserved remains themselves became central to these practices, providing a tangible, lifelike representation of a ruler whose deeds had inspired awe and whose ambition had reshaped empires. In this sense, the final resting place functioned not merely as a repository for a corpse, but as a living instrument of political and cultural continuity, a site through which memory, authority, and reverence could be perpetuated across generations. Over time, the location of Alexander's tomb became a focal point for historical speculation, legend, and scholarship, drawing attention from rulers, historians, and explorers across centuries. Some sources suggest that it remained a site of public display for decades, visited by Romans, Greeks, and Egyptians who sought to connect themselves to the enduring legacy of a man whose life had symbolized ambition, genius, and the possibilities of human achievement. The preservation techniques, combined with careful construction of the tomb, ensured that the body remained impressive and awe-inspiring, reinforcing the symbolic power of Alexander's presence long after his death. The choice of Alexandria as the final resting place also reflects broader patterns in Hellenistic culture, in which cities, monuments, and tombs served as instruments of political authority, cultural memory, and dynastic ambition. By situating Alexander's body in a city that he did not personally found, but that Ptolemy would develop into a center of administration, commerce, and learning, the general was able to link his own rule to the aura of the king, asserting legitimacy, inspiring loyalty, and creating a locus of power that was both tangible and symbolic. This intertwining of physical space, political authority, and cultural memory is central to understanding the significance of Alexander's final resting place, which functioned not merely as a burial site but as a strategic and symbolic asset, capable of shaping perceptions of legitimacy and continuity across a vast and diverse empire. Accounts suggest that over the centuries, the tomb became a site of pilgrimage and veneration, attracting rulers, historians, and ordinary citizens who sought to connect themselves with the memory and achievements of the conqueror. The preserved body, whether still maintained in honey or subsequently treated with other methods, remained a central element of this practice, reinforcing the idea that the presence of Alexander, even in death, could influence politics, inspire devotion, and confer legitimacy upon those who sought association with him. The final resting place also played a role in the transmission of cultural and intellectual heritage. Alexandria, as a city of learning and scholarship, became a repository not only of political power but of knowledge, culture, and tradition, reflecting the enduring influence of Alexander's vision for a connected and cosmopolitan empire. The tomb, with the preserved body at its center, symbolized the continuity of that vision, linking past achievements with ongoing cultural and political development. The care devoted to Alexander's final resting place also underscores the intersection of ritual, symbolism, and political pragmatism in the ancient world. The precise treatment of the body, the architectural design of the tomb, and the ceremonial practices surrounding its maintenance were all carefully calibrated to communicate authority, reinforce legitimacy, and honor the memory of an extraordinary individual. In this context, preservation was not merely practical but also profoundly symbolic, signaling divine favor, heroic status, and enduring relevance. Scholars have long debated the fate of Alexander's body in subsequent centuries, reflecting both the historical fascination with his life and the extraordinary significance attributed to his remains. Some accounts suggest that the tomb remained intact and accessible for centuries, visited by Romans and other powers who recognized the prestige associated with proximity to the conqueror. Other sources speculate about the eventual disappearance of the remains, possibly due to looting, relocation, or natural decay, highlighting the vulnerability of even the most carefully preserved monuments and the ephemeral nature of physical legacy. Yet regardless of its ultimate fate, the final resting place of Alexander the Great remains a symbol of the interplay between mortality, power, and memory. It illustrates the lengths to which human societies will go to honor extraordinary individuals, to preserve physical representations of achievement, and to leverage symbolic capital for political and cultural advantage. The story of Alexander's tomb underscores the profound connection between death and authority in the ancient world, demonstrating that even in the absence of the living presence of a ruler, the body could function as a central instrument of influence, shaping perceptions, reinforcing hierarchy, and maintaining continuity across generations. In addition to its political and cultural significance, the final resting place also represents a remarkable technical achievement. The combination of preservation techniques, architectural skill, and ceremonial design ensured that the body remained protected and that the tomb conveyed the grandeur and permanence appropriate to a man whose ambition had reshaped continents. This attention to detail reflects both the ingenuity of Alexander's attendants and successors and the broader values of Hellenistic culture, in which monuments, ritual, and legacy were intertwined in the projection of authority and the maintenance of societal cohesion. The narrative of Alexander's final resting place also invites reflection on the human desire for continuity and remembrance. Across centuries, civilizations have sought to honor their extraordinary figures through monuments, tombs, and rituals, recognizing that physical preservation of the body can serve as a conduit for memory, inspiration, and legitimacy. In Alexander's case, The combination of careful preservation in honey, transport across great distances, and placement in a strategically significant tomb reflects an awareness of the enduring power of material symbols and the capacity of a single body to influence events long after death. The symbolism of the tomb and the preserved body is further amplified by the myths and legends that grew around them. Writers and historians recorded stories of miraculous preservation, divine favor, and heroic presence, creating a narrative in which Alexander's legacy was not limited to his military conquests or political achievements, but extended into the realm of the supernatural, inspiring awe and reverence among those who encountered accounts of the tomb. These legends reinforced the political and cultural authority associated with the final resting place, ensuring that the tomb remained a focal point for imagination, devotion, and ambition. In conclusion, the final resting place of Alexander the Great represents a convergence of political strategy, cultural tradition, technological ingenuity, and human reverence for extraordinary achievement. From the careful preservation of the body in honey or other substances to the architectural design of the tomb, the ceremonial practices surrounding its maintenance, and the enduring symbolic significance, every aspect of Alexander's burial reflects a profound awareness of the interplay between mortality, memory, and authority. The tomb served not merely as a repository for a deceased king, but as a living instrument of influence, a symbol of legitimacy, and a locus of cultural memory, ensuring that even in death, Alexander continued to shape the course of history, inspire devotion, and command respect across generations. It remains a testament to the extraordinary lengths to which human societies will go to honor their most remarkable figures, blending practical care, symbolic meaning, and political calculation into a singular act of preservation, reverence, and enduring influence, illustrating that even in the ultimate act of mortality, the body of a conqueror could transcend the ordinary and become a cornerstone of legacy, power, and inspiration for centuries to come. The legacy of Alexander the Great's preservation in honey, along with the story of his final resting place, has captivated historians, scholars, and the general public for centuries, becoming a narrative that transcends simple historical fact and enters the realms of legend, symbolism, and enduring human fascination, reflecting not only the extraordinary achievements of the man himself, but also the ingenuity, reverence, and ambition of those who sought to preserve him for posterity. The mystery surrounding Alexander's body has persisted because it sits at the intersection of science, history, politics, and mythology, creating a narrative that is simultaneously empirical, symbolic, and awe-inspiring, and prompting questions about mortality, immortality, and the ways in which human societies seek to maintain continuity with figures of immense influence. From a scientific perspective, the preservation of Alexander's body in honey demonstrates the remarkable understanding that ancient peoples had of natural substances and their properties, even without the benefit of modern biochemistry. Honey's unique characteristics, a combination of high sugar content, low water activity, acidic pH, and antimicrobial enzymes, make it an effective preservative, capable of inhibiting bacterial growth and slowing the decomposition of organic matter. While modern embalming techniques have refined these methods with chemical treatments, refrigeration, and controlled environments, the ancient use of honey reveals an intuitive grasp of how natural materials could achieve similar ends, preserving not only the physical integrity of the body, but also the symbolic potency associated with its appearance. This blend of empirical observation and symbolic intent underscores the sophistication of ancient preservation practices, illustrating that practical and ritual concerns were not separate but rather mutually reinforcing, each enhancing the significance of the other. In parallel, the cultural and symbolic resonance of Alexander's preservation cannot be overstated. Honey was not merely a practical medium, it carried connotations of purity, immortality, divine favor, and heroic status across multiple ancient civilizations. Its golden color, sweetness, and resistance to decay made it a fitting metaphor for a ruler whose life had achieved near mythical status, and the decision to immerse the body in honey signaled to contemporaries and successors alike that Alexander's influence, authority, and symbolic power would endure beyond death. The use of honey transformed the corpse from a mere biological entity into a symbolically charged artifact, capable of conveying messages about legitimacy, divine association, and continuity in a way that extended far beyond its physical form. The political implications of Alexander's preservation are equally profound. In a world where power was contested, where succession was uncertain, and where legitimacy often hinged upon symbolic displays, The possession and maintenance of the king's body became a strategic tool. Ptolemy's intervention in seizing and transporting the body to Egypt demonstrates a sophisticated understanding of political theater. The physical presence of Alexander's preserved remains reinforced Ptolemy's authority, provided a tangible connection to the memory of the great king, and allowed him to consolidate power in a volatile post-Alexandrian landscape. The body functioned as both a literal and metaphorical anchor for political claims, serving as a visual and ritual affirmation of leadership in an era where charisma, divine association, and symbolic presence were central to governance. Over the centuries, the story of Alexander's preserved body has been layered with legend, myth, and historical speculation, each contributing to the enduring fascination with the subject. Some sources suggest that the body remained remarkably intact for decades, even centuries, inspiring awe among those who encountered it. Roman emperors, visiting dignitaries, and successive rulers reportedly paid homage to the tomb, indicating that the preservation of the body continued to confer symbolic power long after Alexander's death. These accounts, whether entirely accurate or partly embellished, contributed to a narrative in which Alexander's presence persisted across time, reinforcing the idea that extraordinary individuals can exert influence beyond the temporal limits of their lives. The mystery surrounding the location and fate of the body has only intensified its allure. Historical records are ambiguous, with some suggesting that the tomb in Alexandria remained intact for centuries while others speculate that it was looted, relocated, or ultimately lost. Archaeologists and historians have long debated its whereabouts, with some proposing sites within the ancient city of Alexandria and others considering alternative possibilities. This uncertainty has fueled imagination and scholarly inquiry alike, ensuring that Alexander's preservation remains a topic of fascination, debate, and exploration, and highlighting the way in which human curiosity about mortality, legacy, and extraordinary lives can endure for millennia. Beyond the historical and scientific dimensions, the story of Alexander's preservation resonates with universal human concerns about mortality, memory, and the desire to leave a lasting mark. Societies throughout history have sought to honor remarkable individuals through monuments, rituals, preservation of remains, and symbolic commemoration, reflecting the enduring importance of physical embodiment as a conduit for memory, inspiration, and legitimacy. Alexander's case is particularly striking because it combines exceptional achievement with deliberate preservation, creating a narrative in which the physical body, the symbolic presence, and the historical impact are intertwined in ways that continue to captivate modern audiences. The preservation of Alexander's body also invites reflection on the relationship between fact and legend. While the use of honey is reported in multiple historical sources, the precise details of the process, the condition of the body, and the duration of preservation remain matters of speculation. Yet these uncertainties contribute to the mythic quality of the story, blurring the line between empirical history and narrative legend. The combination of scientific plausibility, historical documentation, and legendary embellishment creates a compelling narrative framework that continues to inspire historians, storytellers, and audiences worldwide. Alexander's legacy is further amplified by the symbolic power of his final resting place. The tomb in Alexandria, designed to honor the king and consolidate Ptolemy's authority, became a site of political, cultural, and religious significance. Its presence reinforced the continuity of leadership, anchored the memory of Alexander in a prominent urban center, and provided a locus for ritual and veneration. In this way, the preserved body and the tomb together created a multi-layered instrument of legacy, merging the physical, symbolic, and cultural dimensions of influence into a coherent narrative that extended far beyond the boundaries of Alexander's lifetime. In addition to its political and symbolic impact, the preservation of Alexander in honey has generated enduring interest in the study of ancient science, technology, and ingenuity. Scholars examining the chemical properties of honey, the logistics of transportation, and the architectural considerations of tomb construction gain insight into the sophistication of Hellenistic societies and their capacity to integrate empirical observation with ritual practice. The episode demonstrates that ancient peoples were capable of remarkable technical feats, combining knowledge of natural substances, materials, and environmental conditions with cultural and symbolic imperatives to achieve outcomes that are impressive even by modern standards. Moreover, the fascination with Alexander's preservation highlights the human impulse to confront mortality through both material and symbolic means. Across cultures, humans have sought to extend influence, memory, and presence beyond death, whether through monuments, inscriptions, embalming, or storytelling. Alexander's case is extraordinary because it unites these impulses in a single narrative. A man of unparalleled achievement whose body was physically preserved, whose tomb became a center of political and cultural authority, and whose memory has inspired awe, scholarship, and legend for more than 2 millennia. The story also underscores the role of individual agency and foresight in shaping legacy. Ptolemy's strategic decisions regarding the seizure, transport, preservation, and interment of Alexander's body reflect a deep understanding of both human psychology and political symbolism. By carefully managing the physical remains of the king, Ptolemy was able to reinforce his own authority, manipulate perceptions of legitimacy, and consolidate power in a manner that highlights the interplay between personal initiative, political ambition, and symbolic mastery. In addition, the narrative of Alexander's preserved body invites reflection on the ways in which memory, myth, and history interact. The combination of documented historical events, eyewitness accounts, and subsequent storytelling has created a multi-layered record in which fact and legend coexist, each reinforcing the significance of the other. The honey, the transport, the tomb, and the veneration all contribute to a narrative that is both historically plausible and mythically resonant, illustrating the power of narrative to shape perception, preserve memory, and sustain cultural fascination over centuries. The enduring mystery of Alexander's fate also illuminates broader themes of human curiosity, ambition, and reverence. Questions about the tomb's location, the body's condition, and the preservation techniques continue to inspire archaeological exploration, scholarly debate, and popular imagination, reflecting a universal desire to connect with extraordinary individuals and to understand the measures taken to honor them. This fascination is not merely about the man himself, but about the human desire to achieve immortality, to leave a legacy, and to witness the preservation of greatness in both tangible and symbolic forms. Finally, the legacy of Alexander's preservation in honey serves as a metaphor for the enduring impact of exceptional lives. Just as the honey protected the physical body, the narrative surrounding it has protected and perpetuated the memory, achievements, and symbolic authority of the conqueror across centuries. The combination of scientific plausibility, historical documentation, political strategy, cultural resonance, and mythic imagination ensures that Alexander continues to occupy a unique place in human consciousness, not only as a historical figure but as a symbol of ambition, innovation, and the human desire to transcend the limitations of mortality. In sum, the story of Alexander the Great's preservation in honey and his final resting place is a narrative of extraordinary scope and depth, encompassing science, ritual, politics, culture, and mythology. It illustrates the interplay between mortality and legacy, the ways in which human societies seek to honor and immortalize their most remarkable figures, and the enduring fascination that extraordinary individuals inspire across time. The preserved body, the tomb, the legends, and the symbolism together create a multidimensional narrative that continues to captivate, reminding us that the pursuit of greatness and the desire for lasting influence are central to the human experience, and that even in death, the presence, memory, and legend of a singularly remarkable individual like Alexander the Great can endure, inspire, and shape history for millennia, standing as a testament to both the ingenuity of those who sought to preserve him and the universal human longing to connect with, honor, and remember the extraordinary.